What is up, guys and gals? Welcome back to the Nerd Castle. Today, in the world of indie games, we're going to be checking out a title called Final Theory. This one's a little bit older, and ultimately, I kind of passed on it back when it came out in 2018 because it really only had like one army. But there are some very intriguing ideas packaged inside this hyper-streamlined 4X game. And so anyways, if you've never played a 4X game before, usually they focus on extermination, exploitation. You can see a lot of X's in there, which is where the 4X moniker comes from. Basically, they are games about conquering large swaths of something by using diplomacy, by using violence, by using technology, by using research, so on and so forth, and that's how you get there. Final Theory takes that idea, kind of throws it into almost a distiller, like a distillery, and then refines that down into really the core idea of what if there were 4 or 5 factions fighting over the galaxy and every single one of them played like Genghis Khan. On top of that, what if every single one of them was trying to assemble a doomsday device that would wipe out all the other factions along the way, and that's your victory criteria. This game is very streamlined. It is very fast-paced for what is a more in-depth strategy game. It features a ton of ship customization and the ability to really sort of tack out your ships to your liking. If you like running support buff fleets, you can do that. If you want to run highly offensive hit-and-run fleets, you can do that. You can play around with a lot of ideas inside of this game, and I think that the tinkering and the customization is what makes it interesting. Oddly enough, when the game came out in 2018, it only had one army. That's it. Everybody played the same faction with like the same ships and the same thing going on. What's ultimately brought me back to check the game on out again and actually make a video on it is that the developers have promised that within the next month they're going to be releasing multiple factions, 4 of them in total, so that the game will actually have 5 factions that all play kind of differently. And to me, originally with this game, that was really the one thing that was missing, is that I think that a lot of the replayability revolved around like how you can customize your ships, but not necessarily in the idea that there are multiple different factions that all have different sort of mechanics that guide them forward. And so anyways, they've already released one of the armies as a DLC, and there are several more coming over the month of December, which I actually think is going to flesh the game out and make it be pretty rad. So let's dive on in. If after watching this you wanted to get the game for yourself, I have a link for you down below in the description so that you can check that on out. On top of that, you can also find a link to my Discord. We're going to spend about 25-30 minutes here, and I'm just going to kind of like talk about what I do and do not like about the game, and hopefully you can make an educated purchase or like an educated wish list. As of right now, there's only 2 factions. There's the Royal Navy and there's the Imperial Navy. I haven't really had a chance to suss out the difference between the two, but I do have the Royal Navy, and I've got it assigned to some of the AI right here. Initially, the only faction that was available was the Imperial Navy. We'll put it on capable, and then we'll start the game on up, and we'll talk about some of the things you need to be aware of when you dive on in. Due to the continuing decline in tacnium production, the Empire has declared the Outer Rim territories a lost cause. Without this vital resource, millions of colonies will be cut off from space and inevitably regress to a more primitive state of being. The Empire considers such systems dead space, only deemed valuable as potential sites to harvest the stars for tacnium. Every quadrant of the galaxy is preparing for civil war, desperate to sustain their way of life by any means necessary. The archives speak of an old research project conducted at the height of the Empire's prosperity. A weapon capable of harvesting all the stars at the center of the galaxy, enough tacnium for eons. Obtaining this research data has now become the last hope for the colonies. The name of that project was, oh, drumroll, bow. Final Theory. There you go. And so that is ultimately the goal, is we got to find this doomsday device so that we can collapse the center of the galaxy and have infinite tacnium, which will make us just inherently more powerful than all of the other Civil War factions. Alright, so here's the galaxy. It's going to divide it up evenly between us and all of the AIs. We don't have to find the other AIs. They will actually be shown to us when we end our first turn. So the core concept of this game is very, very simple. You play your turn, you can move 1 fleet 1 space per turn, and then there's a bunch of other little managerial tasks you can work on the in-between times. There are little visual things you need to be aware of, but we'll talk about those after we go through the UI, because I think a little bit of elucidation with regards to what everything is with regards to the resources will make it much more apparent why you need to be looking for these things on the actual galaxy map itself. And like talking about it now is just kind of out of context. So anyways, we control 4 regions of space. We have this guy right here, which is apparently an enrichment station. So it's taking our raw tacnium and it's turning it into enriched tacnium. Enriched tacnium is effectively used for super nukes. You can use them to pretty much annihilate an entire sector and everything inside of it if you have enough. It's a fantastic tactical device for really getting the enemy off your back or eliminating one of their principal economic centers. We have a starport over here, as denoted by this little, I guess, like 2/3 of a triangle. This chevron, I guess. Not even really like a chevron. The angularity's off. It's much too acute to be a chevron. So anyways, this right here produces frigates. We've got another starport over here. It makes destroyers. There are 7 vehicles per faction. There are frigates, destroyers, cruisers, battle cruisers, carriers, battleships, and dreadnoughts. I know that doesn't seem like a lot of units, but once we get further on into the video and we talk about how you can customize these things, it will become really, really rapidly apparent that no 2 players' frigates are going to be identical. No 2 players' destroyers are going to be identical. There's a lot of wiggle room in this game to customize your ships towards certain functions and what you want them to do. Down here, we also have a tacnium enrichment area. The resources we have final theory data. Every time we win a battle, we get final theory data. It's just the way that it is. And so from that mechanic in and of itself, it becomes abundantly apparent that this game is about war. There are other grand strategy games that are about sort of diplomacy and outfoxing your enemy and kind of tricking them into deals that they don't want to make on top of the war level. This game is about war and all the trappings that go into it, from doomsday devices to customizable battle cruisers. This game is about fighting and very, very little else. We've got tacnium. This is our main resource. Tacnium is responsible for our construction of ships and warp drives and things of that nature. Enriched tacnium we already talked about. Engineering is a resource that you use in order to upgrade your ship tiers, so you can take them from a Mark 1 up to a Mark 2, which just like flatly makes them better and more upgradable. And then we have development, which is kind of like engineering, but development is used for very, very specific perks that you permanently put on your various ship types that just make them perform like flatly better, like way, way better. So anyways, basically this is for overhauling the entire ship set itself, and this is for adding perks that basically change the way that they perform in combat in a positive way. This down here is your action bar. Every single sector has different actions that you can do. So for example, in these 2 sectors right here, we're going to build a frigate and we're going to build a destroyer. The reason being is that you can have as many ships in reserve as you want. So you basically just have an idle flotilla that is not represented on the map. It's basically invisible. You can see it right here. We have 4 frigates in reserve and we have 4 destroyers in reserve. But we can only deploy 2 fleets, and those fleets can only be comprised of 3 ships for right now. So we can only have 6 ships total on the land map. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to deploy 2 frigates over here and a destroyer. So as you can see, 2 frigates and a destroyer have been deployed on this spot. You can only deploy your stuff if you have a starport in that area. If you don't have a starport, you can't deploy your ships there. It is what it is. Any system that has this little black hole look to it right here is a system that has tacnium deposits inside of it. And so anyways, on any given tile, we can construct ships if there's a starport. We can deploy our harvesters if there is tacnium available. We can salvage ships if there are ships in an area. That'll allow us to get some tacnium back. A final theory warhead allows us, this is basically our victory criteria. If we assemble the final theory warhead, we can launch it and it'll kill all the other factions and we win. We can move a fleet once per turn. We have a propaganda campaign, so if we share a neighboring border with an enemy province, we can deploy propaganda on them to flip it to our control. We have a subspace disruptor. What that basically does is it locks down a sector. So the subspace disruptor is basically a special ability. Nothing can go into or out of a system for 4 turns that has been subspace locked. A Tacnium warhead is basically a baby version of the Final Theory warhead. The Tacnium warhead, it pretty much kills everything and every single building and everything else inside of an area. And you've got to actually assemble these from 1,500 enriched Tacnium. You've by now noticed that we only get 20 per turn. So this is kind of a very, very tactical, very limitedly deployed thing that you don't really get to do a whole lot until late game. So hold on to it. Guard it carefully. In the bottom right, we have our research progress, we have our military power, and we have our Dominion influence. So basically, we are the blue guys on each of these, and our enemies are the other meters. As of right now, because we've deployed that fleet, our military power is twice everybody else's, but I promise it won't stay like that for very long. There is a meter down here in the bottom that tells you how much Tacnium you have for manufacturing things, and then we have reserves over here. This is basically a bird's eye view of every single scrap of Tacnium that we have inside of our empire. And it gets harvested every single turn by like 160, and so this will go down over time, thus sort of signaling to you that like, hey, you need to be conquering. I'm gonna move this fleet right here down to this area. You conquer anything that you land inside of, so this is now ours, and it's an engineering station, so it's bumped up the amount of engineering that we are currently producing. Over here, it looks like we have run into a neighboring faction. That's not great. Ooh, so we are the only faction right now that is sharing a hard border with another faction. Not great. That means that in the early game, we are going to use up a lot of our supply and a lot of our infrastructure just holding these guys back while these people kind of grow unencumbered. It's a little bit of a bummer. I would have preferred they be like elsewhere, a little bit further away, but like, you know, that's part of the randomness of the game, is you deal with the challenges that you've been served up. The last thing that we could do for right now is I would suggest that we deploy a harvester. We can only, so you notice how there's pips on each of these abilities? That's how long it takes to recharge. We can only deploy a harvester every 2 turns. We can only salvage ships every 3 turns. And so just kind of keep that in mind. I sort of feel like attacking these guys early and maybe trying to sweep them before they can get themselves settled is a really, really good plan. So that's probably what we're going to do. But since I can't move, let's go ahead and end our turn, and we'll just kind of wait and see what the enemy does. So they went and conquered. They went and conquered. They built another fleet. Those guys built another fleet, and then they moved over there to solidify kind of the circular border around their territory. So that's good. The Empire has fleets garrisoned all over the galaxy. Yeah, so it'll give you like these little mini objectives too, and if you work on them, you get stuff. I'm going to deploy a 3rd fleet. Oh, no, I can't. Never mind. So we really need to make like a hard and fast decision right now whether or not we want to attack this faction over here. I say yes to war. Engage the enemy. Confirm. Now, if we lose, I don't really mind too much because we do have ships in reserve, so I think it'll be okay. We don't need the combat guide, but this takes place on a standardized hex grid. So on the first turn, this functions the exact same way as the action bar in the main game. And in fact, I really, really do like the way that the game adheres to a very standardized design set. All of the menus in this game are the same, regardless of whether you are managing your empire or whether you are in combat. That's good design. I like that a lot. Basically, the imagery and the iconography, it remains the same throughout the entire game, and that's really, really good forward design. We're going to go ahead and we're going to advance on the enemy here. We're going to go off to a left-hand flank. We're going to use our main engines, and I would like to group up our fleet sort of on this side, and then we will wait and see what the enemy does. Now that we are engaged in combat, let's kind of talk a little bit about what each of these ship types does. So we have the Frigate Mark I. Pretty simple ship as of right now because we haven't upgraded it. We haven't bolted anything else onto the hull. We haven't played around with kind of its loadout. It has kinetic guns. Every single time a kinetic gun fires, it has a chance to penetrate the shield by like 10 or 15% and deal damage even though their shields are still up. They have the shield generators right here. Every 3 turns, we can use that basically to revitalize our shields and make ourselves kind of immune to being damaged. Our destroyers, they have EMP guns. These exclusively target shields. And we have EMP missiles, which can nuke shields from really, really far away. So really the idea between these 2 ships is they work very, very well together. You want to use the frigates to tackle for right now. And you want this guy in the back launching missiles and projectiles effectively away from the main lines of combat. We're going to go ahead and launch our kinetic guns right here. And so as you can see, we dealt a little bit of damage through their shields. I would have liked to have dealt more, but that's a pretty beefy destroyer as far as I know. So it's going to take us a little bit of time to kill it. They also have one frigate, but we do have them, like, very much outgunned right now. So I think we'll be okay. I'm going to move him up to here. EMP guns are out of range, unfortunately. I needed him to be, like, one step back so that I can launch EMP missiles on the next turn. Actually, that was a big shot right there. And then it looks like he's trying to flank around. They're focusing fire on my frig right there. Not great. Not great. Would prefer that that not happen, but let's pull on in right here. We're going to shield boost this frigate. That's going to restore his shields to a certain level. Very, very nice. We're going to fire our EMP missiles at this guy. One thing I do very much like about this game is that there's no AP. If you have an ability and it is charged, you can use it all in one turn. And I very, very much like that. It sort of gives the idea that, like, while fighting the enemy, you have the capability of launching, like, a massive fusillade because, like, you've been waiting and you've been saving up your reactor or whatever else, and you can just be like, unleash it all! And then there can be, like, this massive swarm of missiles and lasers as you broadside somebody. And I think that really sort of helps imply that this game is taking place on a very macro scale. Like, this is big ships that are all slugging it out with each other and sort of just, like, you know, unleashing broadsides and whatnot, sort of like colonial navy 1700s, 1600s style, which to my mind is the sort of combat that I like in games like this. So we got almost no penetration off that shot right there. We're actually going to be a little bit sneaky right here. I have my EMP guns ready to go. I'm going to move him to right here. And we're going to fire our EMP guns right there. We got a little bit of penetration because his shield bubble is going down. What I anticipate is that this guy's going to swoop into here and restore his shield. But it shouldn't matter, I don't think. A little bit of damage has gone off to our... Oh. Okay, so he teleported. Oh, God, my frigate. All right. So this guy doesn't have omnidirectional turrets. What that means is he needs to be facing the enemy in order to fire. Let's kinetic gun this frigate down real fast. You run for your life. Once shield boosters back up. Yeah, once shield boosters back up, we'll figure out what we want to do. Now, one thing you do have to be aware of in combat is that this game does have line of sight. So missiles ignore line of sight. Meaning that if I wanted to fire missiles from this frigate to right here, I could do that. But if you're firing kinetic weapons or projectile weapons, this dude is in the way and he will eat that shot. And so there is kind of like, you've got to arrange your ships in a smart way, otherwise you're going to have a bad time. EMP missiles were inside of range right now, which is a bummer. I'm going to move over to here and then we'll EMP missile from there. I'm not going to say we have this fight in the bag just yet. I would prefer to take 0 casualties right here and not have anybody die. But that's just kind of... Sometimes combat unfolds in a way that is suboptimal. Yeah, I've messed that up right there. I can't seem to get a shot off on him. However, we can't shield boost somebody whose shields are already down. So keep that in mind. We're going to have him fire his shot. You fire your shot. Keep whittling him down. And then what I want from you is to just kind of make sure that you're not inside the line of scrimmage so that you don't eat any damage. Okay, big grip of shields down right there. And then he's going to swing back out and he's going to fire at his shields. That's okay. We're going to move to right here. EMP missiles are now in range, so we're going to fire those. Shields are almost down. Shields are officially down. We're going to shield boost this guy to get his shields back up. Top line is shields, bottom line is hull. And we got to take a risk right here, I think. Oh, okay, so we can gamble. Hey, our shield generator's back up. Very nice. Never mind. I was going to say we have to gamble and decide if we want to take this shot right here and just hope that we get enough damage off to kill this destroyer. As you can see, destroyers do have a much more solid chin on them than frigates do, and that continues all the way up the tiers. And so, like, you might be thinking to yourself, okay, I want to build all big ships then. No, actually, not the case. One thing that I think this game accomplishes really, really well is that through the ship customization, every ship type in this game remains abundantly useful from early game to end game. You can build your frigates to absolutely cinnamon toast wreck huge ships. Like, you can basically build them to be big ship killers. You can take your destroyers and you can turn them into heal bots. You can take your destroyers and turn them into damage vehicles. You can take your destroyers and turn them into movement beasts. Like, you can do all kinds of crazy stuff in this game with your ships, and we'll look at the customization after this fight. I just wanted to make sure that I was putting pressure on some of these neighboring empires. I wanted to strike first, basically, and I wanted to seize the initiative right at the beginning. There's our first battle won. We have been given a bunch of engineering resources, and we've gotten data fragments, which are part of the 3,000 that we need in order to build the Final Theory Doomsday device. Now then, we have captured an enrichment station. This has now enabled us to have a larger fleet size, which is very, very good. That means that we can have 4 guys inside of here, which is really going to take the pressure off some of our future combats. I've been talking about the customization a lot, so let's look at the customization. Up here at the top of the screen, it's going to list every ship type that you currently have unlocked based on the stations that you have. So we have frigates and we have destroyers. With the frigates, we can jump on in here and it's going to give you a close-up view of the ship. It's going to tell you all the features. It's going to tell you all the perks. It's going to tell you all the stats. What you can do is that if you have enough engineering, you can upgrade this to a Mark II. What Mark II is going to do is it's going to give you an ability called Auxiliary Fuel. This means that every 3 turns in combat, you can move them twice instead of moving them once. You also get 15 adjustment points. Adjustment points are used for these right here. You can adapt your armor, your shields, and your weapons to be more effective. So these are basically kind of like attribute points that you can apply to the ship to make it better. And then on top of that, you've got the development menu, which allows you to purchase modules. These modules are going to... So these modules are very expensive. You're not going to have enough money to get all of these. But what they do is they markedly change the way the vehicle performs. And so, for example, Shield Generator can have its cooldown reduced by 1, meaning now you can restore your shields to full health every 2 turns instead of every 3 turns. Right here, you've got Kinetic Guns upgrade. Right now, we have a 10% chance to penetrate shields with every single bullet that comes out of our Kinetic Guns. This will make it a 30% chance, which then makes this a really, really good ship for tackling ships that have focused on shield specialization. We can get our auxiliary fuel charge time down. We can get our kinetic guns to just deal flatly more damage. So that makes this more of an all-arounder vehicle. We can make thermal missiles right here if we have them. We don't have the thermal missiles yet, but we can make them deal more damage. We can get EMP guns if we continue to give these like a higher mark rating, so on and so forth. These things get a teleport drive later on. They can get an armor repair module, which allows you to use these as sort of a de facto healer. For our destroyers, we've got a bunch of stuff to play around with. Everything from, reducing cooldowns on their jump drives to their teleportation, to making it so that their shield boost missiles will heal people for more, EMP missiles deal more damage, so on and so forth. You can customize things quite a bit inside the confines of the game, and it's important to note that these modules exist for all 7 unit types, and you can, assign your armor points and your shields on all 7 unit types. You can upgrade them individually. Were we to upgrade our destroyers right now to Mark II, we would get the micro jump drive, which is what we saw the enemy do, where he teleported then moved. We get those adjustment points, and then we can also increase the max cap on the adjustment that we can put on in. So that's basically how big the ring is right here before you've maxed out the amount of modification you can make to a given ship. I think that might have just been like a minor neighboring kingdom. For whatever reason, I thought that they were the orange faction. So I guess my earlier grousing was unrequited, or unnecessary, I guess. And we'll start right there. I don't have any more movement left. I would think we should probably use our engineering to upgrade something. We can afford frigates right now, and I think auxiliary fuel is pretty good. So I'm going to commission the Mark II frigates. The only bummer here is I don't think the appearance of the frigate changes when you upgrade it in its mark level, and I do wish that that was the case. It would be cool to be able to identify the ships by their mark designation. And so, like, I've always felt sort of like rounding out the ship is always indicative of advancement. So really, in space, you don't want to have hard angles because that means if there's a shield breach and a projectile or like a bolide hits it, surface area is maximized along corners, and erosion is maximized in areas where surface area is the largest, meaning that ships that have sharp angles are going to really suffer from just kind of projectile erosion in combat and whatnot in a way that's not going to be ideal. And so to my mind, making the ships rounder and more sleek as they get more and more refined up to higher mark levels would be the logical thing to do. Not only for eliminating kind of frictional forces, but on top of that, eliminating, I guess, frictional coefficients. And I'm getting into like hard sort of geology and engineering stuff here. But anyways, minimizing frictional coefficients from both weapons and exterior forces like solar winds and things of that nature, I would think would be part of the process of making these things more resilient and also more advanced. But it doesn't look like it changed altogether that much. I would even accept something like the paint job, like it progressively gets more painted in your faction's colors the higher tier it is. I just like to see some visual representation of upgrading. Now we have 15 adjustment points that we want to play around with. Because these guys tend to be really good with shields, we can restore our own shields. I feel like we get a lot of mileage out of increasing our shields. I'd also like to deal more damage. So we've got a 10% damage increase right there, and we've got a pretty solid 8% shield increase right there. I think that's good. I think that's not too bad. I was just thinking about the abilities they have, and the shield generator is made more useful by having more shields to restore to full. And so the max cap on your shields is really going to benefit that. Let's dive back on out, and I think that's pretty much what we can do with this turn. I am going to craft another frigate, and I am going to craft another destroyer just to make sure that our war machine is beginning to slowly churn to life, and we're going to end our turn here. So they've conquered some space. They've conquered some space over there. And it looks like they have also conquered some space. I was kind of taking cues from the AI the first time I played this game as to what I should be doing. Oh, there's a tacnium deposit right here. Go ahead and deploy a harvester then. Yeah, get our tacnium up as high as it can. Right now, enrichment seems to be the thing that we're really excelling at. I'd like to sweep these little minor kingdoms off the map real fast so that we don't have any diversionary forces along our borders. I would like to have a safe border. I think that that's one of those things that every empire from the dawn of time has tried to make sure that they have safe borders on all sides so that you can kind of like exhale and focus on your economy. So that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to move you guys up. We are going to do a hard charge here. I would like to maintain some kind of cohesive line so that I can adapt, but we are going to push the left flank a little bit harder, although I think that might have been a mistake. We should have pushed the weaker frigate on the right side, I think, so that we could kill it faster. We are ready to go right here. I've got to scooch on up, though, if we actually want to participate in the combat. So scooch I shall. We'll go ahead and launch some EMP warfare right there. We're going to bring these guys up. Kinetic gun this guy. Not a lot of damage dealt, unfortunately. We're going to create a blockade right there so that without kind of re-maneuvering their entire line, they can't get to my destroyer, which right now is at optimal distance for firing missiles. And we're going to end our turn. Now, because these guys can teleport, there's no guarantee, that they're not going to do that right there. That's okay, though. Oof, they almost nuked my shields on the first turn. All right, go ahead and restore his shields. I'd really prefer not to use my frigates for tanking right now, but this is why we had them here. EMP missiles are going out to you. Enjoy the present. We did not deal much damage, which is unfortunate. Oh no, I've blocked my own line of sight. I totally forgot about the rule that I explained to you guys because I was on muscle memory. That was an idiot play. We might actually lose this frig right here. Penetration did great right there, though, which I'm happy to see. Penetration did not do so great on that second shot, but the first shot basically ended that guy. Let's go ahead and I'm going to main engine you over to here just for your own protection. You're now in his blind spot, so he's forced to focus on the destroyer. He's coming about right now, though. He's going to come about and try and get him. So what we're going to do is we're going to block that action by moving to right here. We're going to make that sort of obnoxious and difficult to do. A little bit of damage out. We're going to strafe on in over to here, where he's now out of reach of the destroyer by the blockade. This is going to create debris, so he should not be able to fire on this weakened frigate right here anytime soon. We're going to move up, and we're going to get him into our sights because we have his booty hole right now. So he is at his weakest at the moment because he can't fire any of his guns at us at the moment, except for his EMP missiles. Oh, he can. He has omnidirectional turrets. Okay, so he is different from our destroyers. That would make sense since he's a different faction. You know, I was playing kind of by the rules because I'm used to facing off against other Imperial navies, that he was playing by the same rules that we are, and in fact, he is not. However, in coming about, he gave me one tile to play with right there, and that was his mistake. He should have come in one further, and then I couldn't have fired missiles at him. There we go. His shields are down. We're going to go on in. We're going to shoot our shot right here. Very nice damage turn. You love to see it. We're going to have him stand by. Stand by. Right here, I'd like to do something a little cheeky. And then we're going to auxiliary fuel our main engines back behind this destroyer. Very nice. Lovely. That went exactly the way I wanted it to. We're going to go ahead and use the shield booster on him to get his HP back up. There we go. Looking beautiful. Good as new. EMP guns, finish him off. Oh, EMP guns did not do a great job. I should have expected that. Let's let him get the ceremonial final kill right here. Perfect. Beautiful and lovely. I do like the fact that ships that you kill become derelicts, which actually block fire and stop you from being able to fire through. I think that's actually tactically relevant. And like ships dying in the wrong spot where you don't want them to die at can cause like a major headache within the context of like a greater sortie. You may actually have to rearrange like your entire lines just to get around a derelict in a bad spot, or in a good spot, it can create a blockade. We captured a station that's capable of producing cruisers. I love that. But what I really love here is that I can add a fourth ship to this fleet. That's what I'm the most excited about. So they now have a cruiser in their flotilla, which is fantastic. And we have the capability to produce cruisers, which as you can see are quite a bit larger. The cruisers, they come with thermal guns. They're very good against armor, but they're bad against shields. They have thermal missiles, and so they are good against armor, but bad against shields. So really, you kind of want to keep these guys in reserve until you've got the enemy's shields cracked. That, to me, seems to imply that these guys are a natural cohort with the destroyer. So the destroyer is really good at busting shields. The cruiser is really, really good at busting hull. And so it seems like they would be thick as thieves and be kind of an alliance made in the heavens. But for right now, we don't have a lot of means to bust down somebody's shields. Once we get thermal missiles on our frigates at tier 3, I think that this guy will fit much better into our overall kind of fleet composition. With these fleets over here, I would like to bolster them with another ship. With these guys, we're going to go harden the paint on frigates. So we're going to go triple frig over here. And we're just going to use the destroyer as a support unit. I would like to get another fleet on the field, but when or where I'm going to do that, I don't know. We've got another fleet because we captured a starport, and so that's something to play around with. But yeah, this is called Final Theory. I like this game a lot. I'm sorry if my description of the game was a little bit verbose, but there's kind of like, this is one of those games that hits you with a lot of information in like the first 20 minutes, and then after that, there is virtually no new information, and the game just kind of cycles and functions the way you expect it to. It's actually a game that's very easy to pick up and play after that first 30 minutes where you've really got to kind of like figure stuff out for yourself, because the tutorial is not altogether that great. However, I am really, really excited about the addition of new factions to kind of change the way that the game plays. Already today, we had that one surprise from the new Royal Navy faction where they have omnidirectional turrets on their destroyers, and I don't have that. And so that kind of caught me by surprise and sort of forced me to change the way that I was thinking about things. And so anyways, Final Theory, check it out down below. The critiques that I would have is the game tends to slow down a lot in the mid to late game. I would say like your average campaign in this game is probably going to take like 10 to 20 hours by my best guess. And the reason for that is the mechanic where you can only move one fleet at a time. I would recommend that maybe they add... So I was thinking about ways to resolve this and make the gameplay a little bit faster, because the game seems to be a little bit at war with itself in that regard, where this is a very fast-paced, war-focused 4X game that is very streamlined, but it ultimately trips over its own dog leash because you can only move one fleet at a time. And that means that like fighting against other empires becomes very, very slow, and conquering the entire map becomes very, very slow. In the early game, that one move is enough to make it feel meaningful. And I was thinking about what they could possibly do in order to make the game flow a little bit faster. And what I was thinking is there would be a new ability that would allow you to move a fleet an additional time. and it would charge up just like the rest of these abilities, but it wouldn't charge up on its own. It would be reliant on you capturing like one of 2 or 3 nodes that are at the center of the galaxy over here and holding those. And for each node that you hold, it fills up by 1 pip per turn. And let's say that maybe it's got like 5 pips and there's maybe 3 or 4 of them. So at best, you could only double move every 2nd or 3rd turn. I feel like that would enrich the game in the sense that it would give you a way to speed up the progress of the game by allowing you to move multiple fleets. And then on top of that, it would tactically make the game a little bit more interesting because there is now a super important resource that everybody is fighting King of the Hill style to hold, so that, like, obviously being able to double move fleets gives you a huge advantage. And so maybe not even making them revealed, having them be somewhere randomly just in space divided up into just 3 pie-sized chunks, that might also work. And really, really put the pressure, you know, like this faction might get lucky and find one of those right in their front yard. Okay, but now everybody knows that it's there. It's revealed when they capture it. And so now everybody is kind of allying against them to knock them out of that spot and take it. I feel like that would really sort of make the game a little bit more tactically interesting. It's just a thought that I had, because the game does really, really, really seem to slow down a lot in the mid to end game just based on the single move lockdown that every single faction has. And so I was kind of thinking of a way like, how could we take like a 10 to 20 hour sort of bloodbath of a War 4X campaign, and how could we speed it up in kind of the second half of the game? And that was kind of what I came to. But I don't know if that would be viable inside the confines. Like, obviously, the developers know their game a lot better than I do, so that was just sort of spitballing off the top of my head. I'll see y'all later. Thank you for stopping on in. My name is Splattercat. I sift through the pile to find what's worthwhile in the world of indie games every single day so you don't have to. Today it was Final Theory, which is a lovely little kind of light 4X strategy game that I think is pretty cool just because I enjoy ship customization, and I'm excited about the new factions being added on in. I will see you all later. Thank you for stopping on in. Tomorrow we'll have something hot and fresh off the indie skillet, but for now, that's all that I've got. Bye, everybody.